Hey Flosstube friends, welcome back. It's Laura here from Cambridge, Ontario, Canada. I want to share what's happening this week. So I have an update for you on works in progress. I have a couple of finishes and a start even. So let me show you what I've been up to. I'm going to start with Meda. So to catch you up, if you haven't been following along with the Meda saga, I had decided that I wanted to convert my daughter's artwork into a stitched piece. And so I thought at first I would do a counted cross stitch pattern. I would just convert it, which led to some challenges, which I covered in another video. And I realized that that wasn't going to be the method that was going to work for me. So I thought I'll just trace it on and I'll freestyle it. So I was following my nose, just figuring it out as I go. And I can show you kind of some progression of how she's been coming along. I'm stitching her on 30 count lamb's wool linen with DMC floss. I'm using DMC Brights floss in white for her hair to give it a bit of sparkle, and DMC Gold Diamond in her armor and in her staff and in the moon. And I even found a few gold star charms. Okay, and here's where I am right now. So I have almost got her fully stitched at this point. I've got just her cape or her sash left to go. And I have managed to get a little bit of gold threading in with some of the parts where the armor goes. I'm pretty pleased with how this is turning out. And I realize that it has been an interesting journey, that if you decide that you want to do this, a couple of things. One is just making sure that if you do have shading in the image, that you want to reflect that in the stitching as well. So there have been a couple of places I've had to be cognizant of some of the shading, like especially in the arms and in the face and in the neck and that kind of thing. It also comes into play. It's a little more subtle and hard to show on camera, but I've got it in a few places like in the legs and in the arms where I needed a couple of color changes. So a little hard to capture on camera. But the other thing that's quite different about this is because there's so many curves in it, it's not like blocky, right? Like a counted cross stitch. Usually if you're going to do your back stitching, it's on a fairly, not very often when you have a big curve or like narrow curves to do. So you're going to have to take a little bit of license when it comes to the back stitching when you're going around sharp corners. When you're going around curved corners. So one of the things that I realized was I can't just stitch every single stitch, and sometimes I'd actually need to do it more than once because the contrast wasn't standing out. Like for example, the hem of the skirt compared with the thigh there, I realized that you couldn't really see the stitching with just like, you could, but it just didn't stand out very well. So I decided to go over it a couple of times. And so things like that are a bit of an adventure as I go along. Also getting comfortable with fractional stitches, right? So lots of us do patterns if you've done any dimensions, or well, I'm sure all of us have encountered that at some point where it's not an exact full stitch that we're doing. So sometimes it's a half stitch, sometimes it's a quarter stitch, sometimes it's a 3/4. So that kind of helps with like how you'll fill in some of those areas. You also have to be okay with a little bit of frogging now and then. So I couldn't quite get her eyes the way that I wanted to at first. And it was my daughter that picked it up and she said, yeah, you need to do a little bit more on the one eye that was wasn't quite turning out right. Anyways, I went back and realized I had to do a little bit of pulling. I'm still on the fence about the little flowers in her antlers. I may pull those. I did some French knots there, but I'm not quite happy with, well, I kind of am. I'm still on the fence with how that's turning out. But at any rate, this is where we're at with Meda. So she's coming along very nicely. And the she's coming along very nicely. Next step is a bit of beading. So stay tuned for that adventure. Okay, and I have a finish as well. So I have completely framed up my girls with bicycles. So to catch you up on the Girls with Bicycles piece, I had done a previous video where I had talked about how to stretch and pin so you can save a little bit of money in the framing and you didn't have to spend quite so much on custom framing, or at least I don't have to spend quite so much on custom framing. So I kind of went over that process. And I also mentioned in, I think, my first video that I have a real interest in crediting artists behind the works that we are enjoying in our leisure arts and our stitching and some of these pieces that we end up putting on the wall. So I do want to take a moment to discuss who is behind this piece. So it turns out that this counted cross-stitch pattern is based on an original piece called Bicycle Race by Willem Heinrichs. And the reason I found that out because Lennart kindly included his signature when I was doing the cross stitch. I mentioned this actually in the pattern. You can see at the bottom there's a signature, and so I wanted to figure out who that was, and that kind of got me down the rabbit hole of who's the original artist, and even if I could find out information on who charted this pattern. So let me bring up the piece by Willem. So this is Bicycle Race by Willem Heinrichs. And a little description I found about the artist online. It says, with soft colors, the artist conjures up a romantic world of beautiful illusions on his canvases. Willem Heinrichs was born in Rotterdam on October 9, 1940, and his talent was discovered at an early age. Heinrichs was just 16 when he started his training at the Academy in Maastricht, which he followed with further education at the Antwerp Art Academy. Granted a scholarship for talented students, he received his artistic polish as a master craftsman student of the renowned professors Serena and Vartan. Heinrichs' creations are evidence that the great tradition of the Belgian Dutch school is alive and well. I do really like the original piece. It is dreamy and it's romantic. I thought it was everything that this description mentioned. And I love how that was translated into the counted cross-stitch pattern. So the pattern is Lennart Designs by Stony Creek. This is actually from 1991. That's how long I've been hanging on to this. So I don't unfortunately have anything about who charted the pattern. The only credit that is included with this piece is the original model. So you can see the framed example on the front cover. That is credited to, That is credited to Marilyn's Needlework and Frames from Grand Rapids, Michigan. So originally that is who stitched that piece out back in the 90s. So that's a fantastic adaptation of a really kind of a cool Dutch painting. So let me grab where we're at right now. Okay, and this is Girls with Bicycles, all framed up, completely finished. I just love, love, love this piece. I found a great spot for it in the living room so I get to look at it each evening as I'm doing my stitching. And very happy with how this turned out. I originally thought that I would do a mat around it and a much larger frame, but in the end I saw this frame. This is just an off-the-shelf stock frame, a 16 by 20 I believe it is, and I just loved how the color worked so nicely with the colors in the bicycles that I changed my mind. Now, however, I will say I made a mistake. So originally I had stretched and pinned this piece and then I went shopping for the frame. To do it again, I would say get the frame first and then stretch and pin it. The problem was it was just off by just a little bit, like maybe not even 1/4 of an inch. Well, it was off by about 1/4 of an inch, I would say. And so I ended up, believe it or not, I did the whole thing all over again. Here I am unpinning it and I am re-stretching it. So I unpinned it, I trimmed down the board, and I re-stretched and re-pinned it, and I relaced the back. So that would be my one piece of advice. If you are going to do some of this on your own, get your frame first. But at any rate, super, super happy with how they've turned out. My girls are just fantastic. Just love, love, love this piece. Okay, next up for finishes, I also have finally framed up my Serene Village. So this was a little dimensions kit that my mom had in her stash, and she said, hey, do you think you might want this? And I kind of set it aside for a while, but as you know, as I start digging into my closet sometimes, I feel a little bit bad that I've got stuff sitting there, and so then I feel compelled to finish it. So I don't know what that makes me, a serial finisher. I did hear that Brenda is a serial starter. Maybe I am Laura the serial finisher. At any rate, very happy with how this turned out. What I did was I went with a stock frame because I really liked how it looked with this piece. Let's see if I can try and get the glare off there. And I ended up taking it to Michael's to have them take a look for a mat for me. And so they were able to kind of cut it with slightly more margin at the top and bottom and a little less at the sides. But I really like how this turned out. The colors look fantastic. I think it really suits the piece, and I'm very happy and I'm very happy with how this has turned out. So this is what came with the kit, and I don't have any more to go on other than it was Daniel Gorman. I did try Googling. I thought I had found a Dan Gorman, and he is an artist, but I had my doubts about whether it was the right guy, so I just sent him a quick email. He says no. He says it's not him. So unfortunately, I don't have more than that. Oh, one more thing I meant to mention after I showed you the update on Meda, I want to say that in addition to my daughter's artwork as just a digital design, she has other little pins that she's made and she's sold before at different shows. And I had asked for one because I was really interested in having a needle minder. I've never had one before, but they look like they're going to be very handy. And I usually just stick my pin in the corner of my piece, but of course, you know, sometimes they fall out or they get tangled or you know, that kind of thing. So anyways, I thought how nice it would be if I had a needle minder that was also her artwork. So she has shared with me her creature that's got its snout up and its jaws wide open, but she's got a little rose in her mouth. So kind of a really unique little design. So I plan to clip off the back of the pin and of course add a magnet. So that was another nice little surprise. Okay, so those are my finishes, but I also have a start. So I had showed previously that on a trip to the library, which I think is another really kind of an underrated resource, is I found a book by Jane Greenoff. And one of the things that I found in it that I really, really liked is a beautiful blackwork design. So let me see if I can get this up here nicely in the camera frame for you. So I have never done blackwork before, but I'm doing it now because that design is just awesome. So let me show you what I've got. So I'm just going to do the top 2 rows instead of the whole piece. I do want to turn this into a project bag. That's where I'm going with this. I was thinking how really awesome this would look with some blacks and golds and that kind of thing. And as I've mentioned previously, I don't have any project bags. I just have Ziploc baggies. So yeah, I think that would make a really nice project bag. So that's what I've got going on this week. I hope you have a great week and happy stitching.